Mr. Speaker, I rise to lend my support to this bill where the member for Castries East presented this piece of legislation that speaks to the Sovereign Wealth Fund. Mr. Speaker, it would be remiss of me if I did not lend my voice to this debate. And having listened to the leader of the opposition, I felt compelled to add my voice to this discussion. And as was articulated earlier by the member for Soufrière, where the leader of the opposition went to town, you say, all over, north, south, east, and west, on the powers vested in the minister with responsibility for managing and ensuring that this fund is established. But Mr. Speaker, what is of greatest surprise to me is that the leader of the opposition is questioning the power of the Minister of Finance, who will be responsible for this fund. And interestingly, Mr. Speaker, if you follow what's going on out there in the media, I thought that was the very position that the leader of the opposition is seeking to have. So he's sending a message to us, telling us that we need to ensure that he does not occupy that position at all, because he will not be able to manage that fund. And he felt that the Minister of Finance should not have that power to work with his cabinet to ensure that we have a sovereign wealth fund. And the sovereign wealth fund, Mr. Speaker, is very critical, because before this debate in the House, the press asked me some questions this morning, and they articulated exactly what the Prime Minister said in terms of the value of this fund. And that is, we are exposed to climate change, and we are in the disaster-prone zone. Every year we keep our fingers crossed, hoping that the hurricane does not hit us. We are in a region where we are prone to flooding, earthquake, droughts, even volcanic eruption. And with global warming, the possibility of any of these things taking a toll on our environment is likely. And therefore, we are actually preparing ourselves in the event that we have to face these challenges. Mr. Speaker, we are also sending a message to our young people, the adults, the men and women in our society, that we must always prepare ourselves for what we call the wet days. It will not always be sunny and bright, but when things come rough, we are prepared. And therefore, with a sovereign wealth fund, we are actually preparing ourselves for when conditions are likely to get worse. Mr. Speaker, we may have experience of what some of the natural disasters have caused to our country. But Mr. Speaker, I have been privileged in witnessing what has happened in other Caribbean islands. And Mr. Speaker, I can recall when I went to Grenada after Hurricane Ivan 10 days after that hurricane. And it was a shock. And recently we saw what happened in the Grenadines. Mr. Speaker, I saw what happened in Guyana when they had flooding in Georgetown, Guyana. I saw what volcanic eruption has done to a country when I visited Montserrat after the volcanic eruption, and the whole of Plymouth was wiped out. And Mr. Speaker, the worst nightmare was when I visited Haiti after the major earthquake, where 300,000 people were killed in Haiti. And I walked into that place and I saw the mass graves where over 300,000 people were buried. After these incidents, Mr. Speaker, you wonder, where do you turn to? We always depend on external agencies and other countries to come to our rescue. But do we prepare ourselves for when things get rough? And I see the sovereign wealth fund as playing a critical role in any recovery process to build back. Even the issue of drought, Mr. Speaker, we are approaching the dry season now, and our people are already complaining about water. Mr. Speaker, the leader of the opposition may be in a better position to explain to us, because we had the project for desilting of the John Compton Dam, so that we would have a lot more water during the dry season, so that we can supply the residents of St. Lucia with water. We have to give the farmers fuel vouchers in the dry season so that they can produce the crops that we need to keep ourselves going in terms of food security. So when you look at the issue of the Sovereign Wealth Fund, it's not just about infrastructure, but it is about social programs to maintain livelihood, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, I take this as a very good initiative presented by the member for Castries East and Prime Minister of St. Lucia for tabling that bill on the floor in this House as a very positive initiative. And it is actually planning for the future of the current generation and the future of the future generation. And I was pleased to see the presence of our young people in this House today, Mr. Speaker, because we are paving the way for them. And Mr. Speaker, when I heard the leader of the opposition speaks to accountability and auditing, Mr. Speaker, I have worked in non-governmental organizations for years, for decades. And as a former president of the St. Lucia Teachers Union, and up to a day like today, this organization will not go 1 year without presenting the audited financial statement. And this is something that every government, this government, previous government, future government, this is a bill that calls for accountability. It calls for transparency. And this is what we have to ensure that we stick to it, we will work at it, and therefore, Mr. Speaker, we will account for every cent, and the mechanisms are enshrined in this legislation to ensure that it is done. So, Mr. Speaker, again, I heard some people say when they have money, they get a little nervous. Mr. Speaker, I do not get nervous around money, especially if it is not mine. My job is to ensure that it is used for the purpose that it is assigned for. So your job is to oversee and ensure that the money is used for the purpose. And with this, Mr. Speaker, I give my full support to this bill so that we put St. Lucia, continue to put St. Lucia on the right path. Not for just those who are there, but those who are yet to come. I give my support to this bill on the floor, Mr. Speaker, and I thank you for your listening ear.